Okay, this is Jeff Head's 1/350th scale naval model site, although we do 1/72nd scale aircraft and 1/700th scale ships as well, but predominantly 1/350th scale. And we also do a lot of military discussions. Today we're going to be talking about the frigates of the world. Our last video was on destroyers. I've got 8 frigates here representing 6 countries. By no means do they represent all the frigates that are out there, but they will give everyone a good feel for what's on the oceans today for frigates. And frigates are really one of the great workhorses of the navies today. Modern frigates are bigger than destroyers used to be in World War II. They are almost the size, in some cases, of cruisers and certainly have the firepower. But we'll start right over here with one of the United States littoral combat ships. This is the Independence Class version of the littoral combat ship, a little over 3,000 tons, and it will be heavier. We'll get to the other version, which is right over here, which is the Freedom Class version of the littoral combat ship. As you can tell, the Independence is quite somewhat unconventional by today's standards. It's a trimaran. It's built with a very stealthy design and built for great speed, as is the Freedom Class. They were built, during the Obama years, and some bright, bushy-eyed tailed guys helped design them to begin with. They just had that 57mm gun out front and the close-in weapon system in the back, a few defensive systems, and they had the idea that within 24 to 48 hours, they could add or take away modules and completely change the role from anti-submarine warfare to anti-surface warfare, etc., etc. They found that that was not possible, and it took upwards of a week to change out one of the modules, and then the modules weren't going as they expected. And so there was a lot of grief and a lot of controversy with it. Ultimately, the United States decided that they would have to develop more weapon systems and more crew for these ships because no matter where you go, if you go into combat, and if you want these to be combat littoral combat ships, then you have to be able to handle combat damage, and having just sufficient crew to operate the ship won't let that happen. So they've gone through a gestation and a long development cycle, and I think they finally hit on what they plan to do. You see the Independence version over here, and on the far side you see the Freedom version. They're going to build a total of 35 ships, 17 Freedom Class, 18 Independence Class, and then they're going to upgrade them to what they call the Fast Frigate format. And what that simply means is they're going to add the weapon systems on there. In fact, they're already doing it. They're adding more weapons, more sensors, and more crew, and more electronics and radars. And essentially they're adding what so many people said they needed from the get-go. And it's good that they listened, but it took them many years to do so. And so the United States in essence has been without a frigate since they decommissioned the Oliver Hazard Perry class frigates, which were good frigates in their time back in the Cold War period in the 80s and into the 90s. And several countries that we sold them to are still using them, and they've upgraded them with VLS cells and all types of things, which the United States Navy could have done as well. These ships were built for speed and an idea of doing combat that just couldn't pan out. They needed more crew, they needed more weapons, and so I have built them pretty much to the Fast Frigate format. And what you see here on the Independence is the potential for a 16 to 32 VLS, Mk41 VLS module up front. They've decided to put 8 missiles in 2 4-canister launchers, and these will be the Naval Strike Missile from Norway. Excellent missile, longer range and newer than the Harpoon missile, and they fit very well on these ships. Also, this one doesn't have it on here yet, but there will be 2 30mm guns in the back and a SeaRAM missile launcher. It's expected that the Independence class here will mainly work with the amphibious groups and will be capable, as you see here on the back, the flight deck is very large and is capable of carrying CH-53, very large helicopter, to pull the anti-mine warfare apparatus you see there, which is very large, but is used to clear out minefields, which is a very important task for ships to do in an amphibious operation. These ships also can carry up to 2 Seahawk helicopters. They will carry sonar, both towed array as well as a standard sonar. So they'll be good at anti-surface warfare, they'll be good at anti-submarine warfare, and particularly if they get the VLS cells, they will be decent at medium range coverage, stacking them with Evolved Sea Sparrow missiles. If you have 32 cells times 4, or even 16 cells times 4, you get either 128 or 64 missiles that can cover out to 50 miles, and that's very decent medium getting into the longer range coverage. There are also going to be 24 vertical launch cells back here on the back that will be used for Hellfire missiles that will be pretty standard fare with these ships. And those are on there so that they can take on the swarming, what they call swarming speedboats that might attack these ships or other U.S. vessels. And with 24 Hellfire missiles, and with the 57mm gun, they feel like they could take them out fairly straightforwardly without having to use their heavier weapons. So now we'll go over here to the Freedom Class. The Freedom Class is a more standard monorail hull that is about 3,500 to 4,000 tons. This one also has the Naval Strike Missile up front and the 57mm main gun, as you can see. Also has decent electronics. You can see the 24 VLS missile launcher there for the Hellfire missiles. You see the 2 30mm cannons. This one is carrying a RAM missile launcher that has 21 missiles, which is an effective short-range missile fire for anti-aircraft. Not really for any kind of medium or long range, but they can certainly protect other ships that are close to it. Ultimately, the plan is to put a couple of 8 or 16 Cell VLS launchers on it. They too can carry 2 Seahawk aircraft. They have a larger landing pad than the Arleigh Burke, and so these vessels will in essence become frigates. And the Independence class will be used with surface groups, as well as escorting various types of vessels for, auxiliary vessels for ammunition or replenishment, as well as adding to the particular submarine warfare and anti-service warfare for carrier strikes groups. And there will be 17 of these ships built and 18 of the Independence class. The United States also plans to build 20 pure fast frigates that are supposed to come from this same group of ships. And then the United States has announced that they're going to build 20 full-blown guided missile frigates, FFGs, and that competition is going on now and will be chosen sometime in the next year. And there's 4 ships in competition for that still. The one that I'm hoping will win it is the Bath Iron Works version that's been put forth by Bath Iron Works, that will be a derivative of the Hobart Australian class Aegis frigate or destroyer. It'll be a little smaller than that, but it'll be a full Aegis capable ship, and it will carry at least 32 vertical launch missiles and maybe 48, and it will be a full function frigate. It's not here because we haven't seen the actual ship itself, but if you look at the Hobart class ship and pare it down several thousand, the Hobart, I guess, is something like 7,000 tons, so good 2,000 to 3,000 tons are going to come off. I think it's going to be a 5,000 ton ship, and I'm pretty excited about it because I think it will be a very effective frigate, and that is something the United States Navy needs. And when you take the 35 and add the 20 and then the other 20, you're going to have 75 frigate type vessels that the United States Navy will have, and that will be plenty enough. So let's go on to some of these others. The next one we're going to look at here is the Duke class type 23 frigate. It is one of the most effective frigates out there right now. It's the Royal Navy's frigate. It's a very good multi-mission frigate with, now that it has been upgraded, all 13, I believe it is, ships have been upgraded with new radars and new sonars and new missiles for the anti-aircraft. They carry 8 long-range anti-surface missiles. They're up front. A 32 vertical launch missile launcher. It's a British launcher for their new shorter range missiles. They've got a single helicopter landing pad and hangar. They're carrying a couple of autocannons up here. The only thing I fault them with is they're outside of the missiles, which are very good. They don't have any true close-in weapon system for the gun in terms of anti-missile. They do have anti-shipping, 2, one on each side. We'll come in here a little closer and you can see it there. It's a 30 millimeter, I believe, could be 25 millimeter automatic gun, and so they have that covered for fairly close in anti-terrorism, anti-speedboat type defense, but mainly in its most important role, it can defend itself against against aircraft. It can defend itself against pure frigates with its missiles, and it can then use its new anti-submarine warfare, and it will carry a larger, we've got a Lynx helicopter on this one, but a Merlin helicopter can land on that deck and can fit just barely, but it fits perfectly into that hangar. So with a Merlin helicopter and with their towed array and regular sonar, it is a very powerful anti-submarine warfare ship. And the British will use it very effectively for their anti-submarine warfare duties for amphibious groups, and especially for the carrier groups for the Queen Elizabeth class. Now this is one we're looking at here. Of course, one more thing about the Duke class. The British plan in the 2020s to build the Global Combat Ship, which is a new frigate that will carry the Silva anti-missile vertical launch cells, just like the Daring class. And so there will be 32 missile carrier there for that, and they will be compatible with the Duke class and have the same very good anti-submarine and anti-surface warfare capabilities. And that is going to come in over the next 2 years. Now let's look at this Gorshkov, Admiral Gorshkov frigate from Russia. It is probably the strongest frigate out there. If we look up front, they've got a 32 missile vertical launch group, a large main gun, which is a dual purpose gun. They carry 16 Switchblade anti-shipping missiles, and that's a heavy load. It's like I said, this thing is loaded out the way a destroyer would be loaded out, although many destroyers are 48, or in our case 96 vertical launch missiles, so they're not that strong in terms of anti-air, but the anti-air they do carry is very powerful. They also have Ka-25 sized anti-submarine warfare. I believe they have a towed array and they have a regular sonar, so they're very powerful there. And then in addition to their 32 missiles up front, you can see they have two cashed-in type close-in weapon system for one frigate, and that's very powerful. That's two 30-millimeter guns on each of those, and then 6 ready-to-fire close-in weapons similar to the RAM rolling airframe missiles that we launch. And then I believe they have either 16 or 24 ready-to-launch automated missiles that they can load automatically there. So they have a very strong close-in weapons system capability, which is stronger than any of the other frigates that we're going to see here, and that I believe are going to be developed in some time. The biggest drawback that the Russians have is they just can't build them very fast. They have this one that they started building a few years after the Cold War ended, and they just got it commissioned last year. So it's taken them, 15 and more years to get this ship out. The second one is in the water, has not been commissioned, but is going through sea trials. They have trouble paying for this stuff because they don't have a lot of money. The only thing they did have was oil, and the United States now, under the Trump administration, has opened up all the restrictions on oil production, and the United States is now the largest petroleum producer in the world, also the largest coal producer in the world, and also the largest natural gas producer in the world. And so the countries that were having to pay significant sums to Russia and funding what they were doing can now get that cheaper through the United States, and that has hurt the Russians in terms of their ability certainly to build large ships, but it's even affecting their frigate development. They've got 5 of these building and hope by 2025, but at the rate, to build all 5 of them. But at the rate they've been going, I don't expect they'll get them done in that time frame. They have built other frigates that are decent, but this is by far the most effective one. And if they can get 5 out, that will be wonderful for them. But while they're doing that, in the same time frame, the United States is going to produce, another 15 or so of its new frigates to add to the 11 that are commissioned of each class already. And with the Naval Strike Missile and their capabilities in concert with Burke class destroyers, they will just outclass not the frigates themselves, but the combination of ships that the United States puts out there. They'll be able to go 3 and 4 to 1 against these very capable frigates that not the Soviet Union, the Russians are putting out. And I have to say that that's a very capable ship that they have there. Let's look at the Chinese frigates. The Chinese have really, really come a long ways in the last 10 years. They built 30 of these frigates right here, which is the type 54A, and some believe 54B or a follow-on to it. They have a 32 vertical cell launcher that is quite capable, medium and even long-range missiles, a strong main gun. They carry 8 long-range anti-surface missiles. They also have 2 30-millimeter close-in weapon systems. Now, these close-in weapon systems aren't accompanied with missiles like the cash tin, but they are very effective in terms of their rate of fire and the size, and so they're well defended for close in, as well as well defended with their own missiles. They also have anti-submarine rockets, and they also have a medium-sized helicopter and its hangar and a landing pad. And as I said, they have built 30 of these and will soon move on to others, but they have a strong frigate capability. And let me now show you another version they had. While the United States was trying to figure out how to build a littoral combat ship, I believe the Russians went out and built one. It's not as big or as capable in some areas as the United States, but while the United States was trying to figure out what, if any, long-range missiles to put on their Independence Class and Freedom Class, which has been solved, by the way, and now they have 8 Naval Strike Missiles. The Chinese were building these smaller, about 2,000-ton ships with a Chinese version of the rolling airframe missile back there that I believe carries 8 or 9 missiles for close in. And this is a true littoral combat ship. This ship is not meant to go out into the blue water, but it's meant to cover the littoral areas of China's long coast and replace the much older 1980 and 70 technology frigates that they had. And so a helicopter can land on the tail end of this thing and be completely refueled and rearmed, though there is no hangar for the large helicopter, or it's a medium-sized helicopter, but they can work with those helicopters to prosecute submarines near their coasts. And they have built a lot of these. In the last 4 or 5 years, they've probably built close to 50 of them, and we expect they're going to build 80 of them. And so they have these light frigates, you might call them, but it's opening the door for their destroyers and their larger frigates that we just looked at to go out into the blue water and cover their sea lines of communication. They are sea locks, and these ships are very capable in concert with land, air, and land helicopter or naval helicopters to very effectively cover their littoral combat areas. And they went out and built a whole bunch of new ones while the United States was trying to figure out how to make their frigates work the way they wanted to. And that's been done now, but in the meantime the Chinese have built many of these vessels whose missiles have the range to take on our own ships if we enter close into their shores. I also have an older German frigate. It's the F-122 that the Germans are still using. They're more of a 1990s and early 2000 frigate, and their newer ships are smaller but more powerful. But this ship is a good ship. It's got a good main gun. It carries ESSM missiles. It has 2 rolling airframe missiles back at the back, so that's 42 missiles right there. And then they've got 8 ready-to-go ESSM missiles that have a 50-mile range, and they've got reloads for them, I think 16. So this is a decent frigate for the Germans to use in any show the flag surface warfare group or working in conjunction with the United States or other allies. And that's the German F-122, and I believe that this F-212 is the Karlsruhe. And finally, the last one I have to look at is getting up closer to a destroyer class. This is a Japanese frigate, and they have several type classes like this. This is the lead class of the Takanami ships, which came on after the Murasame class ships, which are very similar, a little smaller, but also carrying 32 missiles up front. And you can see their Phalanx class close-in weapon system right there in the front. And then back here on the back you can see a second one. They also carry 8 Japanese harpoon type missiles amidships, 2 quad canisters, and they have 32 cell Mk-41, so they can carry ESSM missiles. 32 times 4 is 128 if they need to, but they also carry their own Japanese built sub-rock for anti-submarine warfare. So you can figure of the 32, they're probably taking up 8 of those for anti-submarine warfare, and then a 5-inch gun on top of that. And this is a very effective and very squared away vessel. And in the back again, here you have a SH-60J Japanese Seahawk that also can carry a UAV, a vertical UAV, unmanned remote controlled helicopter to do reconnaissance and patrols, and also to look for submarines. So this is a pretty good sized ship. It's just under 6,000 tons, so it's edging up there into the destroyer size. But the Japanese have a number of these ships that are right on the edge, and so we'll call the new Akazuki and the new follow-ons to them, and their new Atego, the 2 new Atego and the original 2 Atego Aegis destroyers, and their original 4 Congo class destroyers. Those are true destroyers, large destroyers, and they've got quite a few of those larger ships, and then probably have a good 50 frigate-sized vessels that they carry as well. So these are the frigates that are plowing the world's oceans these days. I've got to say that Norway and the Danes and even the Indians are making decent frigates as well. Most of those don't have models for them, so we can't build models that don't exist. But for the time being, here are a number of frigates that I believe pretty much cover the range of frigates and their capabilities that are out patrolling the oceans of the world and patrolling basically the sea lanes of communication for these various countries and working with their allies. China does a little work with the Russians, and so they work together, and they work with Pakistan as well, and a few other people, Syrians, etc. The United States, of course, works numerous times each year with the Royal Navy, with the Japanese, with the Koreans. By the way, the Koreans with their KDX destroyers and their own frigates have some decent ships as well. Vietnam has built up its navy and has some very decent frigates and submarines. So they exist out there as well and in numbers. But these cover the capabilities of those types of ships as well. And I hope you enjoyed it. Tell other people about our channel. Pretty quickly here, I'm going to be doing two things just for your knowledge. I have found and bought a 1/350th scale Prince of Wales that I'm going to outfit with F-35Bs, with Merlin helicopters, and with Ospreys. And we'll show that ship by itself, but we'll also show a full Royal Navy carrier strike group centered on the Prince of Wales. Also, we're going to do another 2 videos similar to this one that will be for submarines. I think I'll have 2 submarine videos, one for nuclear powered attack submarines and one for conventionally powered, particularly AIP, air independent propulsion submarines. We'll also do a video on the cruisers of the world, because there are a number of countries that have full-blown cruisers. The United States, the Chinese, the Russians, all have ships that are not only big enough to be, but are actually called cruisers. And the Koreans with their Sejong the Great 11,000-ton Burke type Aegis destroyers have them too. So with that, we'll wish you the best, and hope that these ships can continue defending the sea lanes out there, and that we forestall any combat that has to happen, but that we're prepared, particularly in the West, to defend freedom and make sure that we have the skills and the systems to do so. And I think there can be no doubt that the United States Navy does. I will tell you that very rapidly the Chinese have now in the last 10 years become, without a doubt, the second largest and most capable Navy in the world. And nobody, I think, that looks at what they've developed in the last 10 years and see what they have building as we speak can doubt that for an instant. And nobody should take them for granted, because they're serious, they're squared away, they're training a lot, they're spending the money to do it, and they're putting the systems to sea to do it. The old Chinese Navy of the 1990s that was 1960 and 70 class ships has now given way to modern ships that in many areas are getting close to being as capable as our own, but there are many other areas where they're still trying to catch up with us, and we need to not sit on our duffs. We need to make sure that we continue doing the research necessary to get the rail guns and the lasers that we've already developed and just need their final testing before we put them on ships at sea, because they will be game changers. The F-35B is another game changer that's out there. So with that said, I'll let you go. And like I said, make sure you tell your friends about the channel we have, Jeff Head's 1/350th Scale Naval Channel and Defense Channel. Thank you very much. Good night.